Alright guys, welcome to another video of our React series. In this video we're going to talk about a very important hook in React, which is the useRef hook. It is used for managing the DOM references and also for state management without re-render, right? We've talked about the useState hook, and we said the useState hook is used to manage our states in our applications. But why do we now talk about the useRef to manage state? Remember, the useState, whenever you're using the useState hook to manage a state, it causes re-render. But what if you want to perform an operation that does not really need you to re-render your application? What do? You use the useRef hook. The useRef hook is a React hook that creates a mutable reference that persists across renders, right? A mutable that persists across renders. You don't need to re-render, unlike the useState where updating a state will cause a re-render. The useRef values does not trigger a re-render. Right? Common use case of that is to access your DOM directly, storing mutable values without re-render, and when we say mutable values that can be changed, and of course holding previous state values for comparison. So we're going to see how to use this particular hook in our application to make references to our DOM and to change mutable values without rendering. So let's head over to our code editor to see how to use this particular hook. So here we are in application. We are going to go to our page, and we're going to create a file called useRef.jsx. Right here we're going to import React. Always import React from React. Right. So after that, we're going to have a function, a main function. We're going to call it useRef, which is going to return our JSX as always, and we're going to export as default. Export default useRef, right? So we'll go back to our app.js, and we're going to import useRef from useRef, right? So we imported it from useRef. So here, let's see how we can create an input, create a button. So whenever I click on the button, I'm going to focus on the input. That is what we're going to create now. When I click on a button, I'm going to create a focus effect on the input without re-rendering the page, right? So we're going to do that using the useRef hook. First, we're going to create our constant ref. We're going to call that input ref. Sorry about the back noise in my background. Input ref, it's going to be useRef hook. Always remember to import your hooks from React. Here I have my useRef imported from React, and the initial value of my useRef is null. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a function that will help me focus, that will be triggered when I trigger an event. So it's basically going to call it an event handler to handle my input focus. So I'm going to say const focus handler. Focus handler is going to be a function, right? What's this function going to do for me? It's going to have access to the input ref we created, and the input ref has a property called the current with a property called the focus. Because we're going to use it on an input, you should be able to focus on an input. If we do that, I'm going to say this. What this does is to access the DOM element directly. So access the DOM element directly and trigger, of course, for an input to have the focus method, right? And triggers the focus method. So let's head over to our JSX. What are we going to have here? In our JSX, we're just going to create a single parent div. Let's go back to our use reducer and copy. Please, let's go back to our use reducer and copy. What are we copying here? Is it in our use reducer? Is to do, right? To do. I'm just going to copy the style so I don't rewrite them. Have them here. So here I'm going to create an input. In this input, I'm going to have an attribute or a property called ref, right? Property called ref, and the ref is going to be our input ref. So this basically means a reference. So this is what I'm going to use to reference this input, and of course the input is going to have a type of text. And let's just have a placeholder of nothing really. nothing really, right? So after this, I'm going to have a button. This button is going to create focus, right? I'm going to say create focus. Let's go back to our to-do, of course, and copy the button styles. I'm just going to paste them here. Copy my style. So if I save this and let's run our application, open terminal and say npm run dev. So this is going to run my application on port 5173. If I copy this and paste in my browser, I'm going to have our application running. So I have an input and I have this, right? So what do we want to achieve? We want to achieve a situation where if I click on this button, I want to create a focus. That means the button is going to have a click event that's going to trigger our focus handler, right? This. So if I save this and I go back to our application, let's make sure everything is correct. Go back to refresh. So if I click on this, you see my input is being focused on. Let me reload this and demonstrate again. If I click create focus, my input is being focused on. So that is how to trigger an event in your application using the useRef hook without creating a re-render effect in your page, right? So the next thing we're going to see is how to store a mutable value without rendering. What I mean, mutable values that can be changed. This you can do with your useState hook, but the only difference is that in your useState hook, if you're storing a mutable value, whenever you want to change that value, it's going to create a re-render. But in the useRef hook, if you're creating if you're storing a mutable value, your page does not re-render and it does not cause your UI to re-render, of course. Yeah. So let's see how we're going to do that using the useRef hook. You can do that using the useState. Make reference back to our useState video and see how to do that. So in this case, I'm just going to clear everything we have here. Permit me to do so. Right. I'm still going to have. So this is going to be count row, counter ref. Right. So we're going to create a counter ref, create a mutable value. This initial value should be 0. So after that, the first thing we're going to do is to create a function that will help us to increment this value. I'm going to call this increment handler, right? Increment handler is just going to be a function, right? That will get our counter ref. So increment value will get our counter ref and get the current property of our counter ref. And what are we going to do to it? We're just going to add 1 to it. So the value updates without re-rendering the application, right? This value is going to update without re-rendering the application. That is what we're going to do. And let's just comment out something. Let's say console.log, right? Current count. Our current count is going to be, counter ref dot current. So when we do this, we're going to look at what's happening here. So the next thing we're going to do is just to create a button. I wouldn't have cleared my button. So create a button, and with this button we're just going to say increment count, right? And this button we're going to give it on click event, and on click event we're just going to call our event handler, right? So if we save this and make sure everything is working, we're going to see our values change, and it's going to persist across renders, but it is not going to re-render our application. If we go back to our application, I will try to open our developer tool. I am used to creating very ugly buttons. Let me copy these styles and just add it to the button, make it better. Right. So if we go back to our terminal, and if I click on this, our current changes to 1. If I click again, it changes to 2, 3, 4. So these values becomes persistent and is persisting across all our renders without creating a re-render effect. Right? So that is how to use the useRef hook to create to store a mutable value that's going to persist across all renders. So the next thing we're going to do for the useRef hook is to see how we can keep previous states without causing rendering, right? All of this we can do is with the useState hook, but let's see how we can use the useRef hook to keep previous states without causing re-renders, right? So the first thing we're going to do for this example is to first of all create a previous hook state rather. Yeah, we're going to create a previous state. We're going to use the useState hook. I'm going to delete everything we have here, permit me to, and I'm just going to create my state. I'm going to create say const count and set count should be my useState. Remember to import your useState from React, and my initial value is going to be 0, right? Just watch what we're going to do here. And I'm going to use my useRef hook to say const previous count ref is equal to the useRef hook, which is 0, of course. After that, the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to combine both the useEffect hook. So this is going to run only when my application is done rendering. We had a video for useRef useEffect. If you are lost, go back to the video to see what we did there. And what I'm going to do in my useRef is to make my previous states equal to my useRef. So I'm going to say previous count ref dot current is equal to count. The previous count ref is from the useRef hook, and the count is from the useState hook. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to go to my JSX, and I'm just going to create a div, of course a parent div. Let's go back to this and copy. I think we should have a permanent div that will not be disappearing. So inside of this div, I'm just going to create a paragraph tag that's going to hold our current, which is going to be our count, right? Going to be a count, and I'm going to create another paragraph tag which is going to hold our previous. Our previous is going to be previous count ref dot current. Going to be previous count ref dot current. So this is going to come from the useState hook, and this is going to come from the useRef hook. So what's the next thing to do? We're going to create a button. Of course, let's copy our button style. This has become our usual practice for this video. I'll copy our button style to make it look better, and we're going to say this is just going to be increment. So when I click on this button, what happens? Let's add an event. On click event. So what happens when I click on this button? We're just going to call a function. What's the function we're going to call? We're going to set our count to whatever value we want to. So we'll say set count, which is our useState setter right here. From here, we're going to say set count. We are setting it to count plus 1. So whatever the previous state is, we're setting 1 to it. So if we save this and make sure everything is working correctly, we created our useState hook, created our useRef hook, created our useEffect hook to have all of this done. And here we created our button, our div, 2 paragraph tag, and a button. So if we save this and go back to application, we'll have this, right? So if I click on these buttons, this becomes 1, right? We can track the previous value without re-rendering. We can track the previous value without re-rendering. Now we have the previous value as 1, and the current value is 2. The previous value was 2, and the current value is now 3. If we keep increasing, we are tracking the previous value and we are getting the current value. This is actually what we wanted to achieve. And if we reload again, see the previous value is 0, the current value is 0. If I increase, the current value becomes 1. Of course, the previous value was 0. If I increase again, the current value becomes 2. The previous value becomes 1. So that is how to keep record of our previous value without causing any re-render in our application with the help of the useRef hook. Now let's talk about when to use the useRef hook and when to use the useEffect hook. Please just pay attention. When you want to build something that will trigger a re-render, you want to re-render your page, please always use the useState hook. It works very well for for page rendering, don't use the useRef. But when you want to store values between renders, you can use the useRef hook and you can use the useState hook. But then useState hook will cause a render, useRef hook will not cause a render, and useRef hook will give you a smoother operation, a smoother experience that will just work smoothly without causing a render. So, and I said the DOM manipulation, storing of past data and components. If you want to store data, you want to store the state of your DOM, you want to store persisting data, you use the useRef hook. And if you want your component state to update and all of that, use the useState hook. So I'm going to give you a challenge on this video. I want you to build an input field that auto focuses when the component mounts using the useRef hook. So I'm going to give you a hint. This is going to work when you use your useEffect. useEffect is a hook that runs when your component mounts, and when your component mounts, you can use the useRef hook to autofocus on your input. This is your task. If you can do this and submit your answer, submit the link to your repo in the comment section. I'm going to go through it and I'm going to talk about it in our next video. So today we learned how the useRef hooks help us to access the DOM, store values without render, and even track previous states efficiently. Try to use it in your next project. And what are your takeaways? Always remember that the useRef stores values between renders without causing it to re-render. It's great for accessing the DOM elements and storing mutable values. It's preferred over useState when you don't need your components to update. And of course, the best practice is to use your useRef for DOM interaction and non-rendering state, right? That is all for this video, guys. Please don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share, drop your comment as well. If you're having challenges, drop in the comment section. See you guys in the next video. Bye.